Hello, everybody. It's Donna Cravata, and we are here today with another Real 50 Over 50 interview. And today we have Victoria Lynne Hannu, and she is a holistic business coach, a consultant for the super creative business owner, and the founder of Heart and Soul CEO. She works with all different types of creative business owners, and she adds in her holistic, human-centered approach. And together, they build a business that turns their mess into their success. So, welcome, Victoria, and I'm so happy to talk to you today.
Well, thank you, Donna. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to have our conversation today and see what wisdom we can impart to those who are listening.
Yeah, we always come up with some good wisdom. But I like to start these interviews off with asking what happened when you turned 50.
What happened when I turned 50? Well, when I turned 50, I literally became a new mom in a way. Uh, when my youngest daughter had a child, and then a few years later, we ended up adopting our granddaughter. And so I was a grandmom of a 5-year-old. And a couple years before that, I had she'd become ours and raising her. So at 50, I was back raising kids and trying to grow a business at the same time.
That's challenging.
It is.
I've done
It is.
that.
But you know what? The one thing that's really kind of cool about it is that all of a sudden you're alive again in a way that you hadn't been since your kids were young, right? So
Mhm,
meeting new people. I met so many new people because when
mhm.
you're going to school and this
Yeah,
school
yeah,
playgrounds and everything from
that's when you
50
meet the local people.
yeah, it was really fun though, because as she got older and we went to this new school, she was around 6, 7, and she went to a new school and she had made some friends. But after school, it was like in corporate, you have a water cooler and people hang out around the
Mhm.
water cooler. Well, the playground was the entrepreneur's water cooler because you had all these entrepreneur moms that were picking up their kids. And so we had our own water cooler, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that would have been fun if I was doing that with entrepreneur moms, but they were just in the gonna do yoga, get a smoothie, go for a hike, have lunch, go shopping, and pick up their kids group.
Ah,
And I was like, "I'm going to work." And they were like, "What do you mean?"
yeah. I just happened to meet other entrepreneur moms who, while a little younger than me, they were all approaching their 50s as well. So there
Mhm,
was at this school, there was a lot of older parents, right, that had had their kids in their late 30s and early
mhm.
40s. And so navigating that. So they were either approaching 50 or they were already there.
And how lucky was that group of kids because they had this incredible group of moms that, weren't stressed or well, even if you were stressed, it's in a different way than you are when you're, like, in your 20s and your 30s and even your 40s. It's a
Oh,
different experience.
it really is. Things don't bother you as much. And one of the things is that you kind of go, okay, there's a wisdom that you bring to it. You don't fret as much. And our daughter, she had developmental delays because of her life before she came with us. And so we were working with those as well. So it's when you're in your 50s, you're more conscious about the impact of what you do
Yeah.
versus in your 20s and 30s and maybe early 40s, but 20s and 30s specifically, you're trying to find your way, you're trying to
Mhm.
survive, you're trying to figure it out, and it's so easy to take other people's opinions as fact when they're not
Yeah,
necessarily about you as fact, and
yeah.
they're not.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you at and, 50 and beyond, you come with a whole different layer of, like, resource library, you know?
You do, and I think at when being 50 and being a mom again, I literally parented for 43 years.
Mhm.
And being a mom again, there were things that it was like, that's your journey. You're making those choices. Okay, I'm not,
Yeah.
we can't control the choices you make when you're not
Mhm.
with us.
Mhm.
And that's real important. But what was interesting about the journey was how it taught me about what happened with my clients.
Say more.
Okay, so when my daughter was, well, yeah, she was 7 and working with her therapist, I was interning with the therapist. And my daughter was a verbal processor. So she would speak anything that was running through her mind. And in that process, I learned how we all learn how to talk about ourselves, how we all learn, how we all were programmed.
Hmm.
Because having this child who's a verbal processor that runs everything through her brain that to you, it really is really fascinating. And in doing the work with her in conjunction with her therapist, I learned so much more about human nature and how we hang on to things. And having that knowledge and having the gift of being able to work through things with her, it gives me an understanding of my clients that's way deeper than most business coaches.
Hmm.
And that's why that's why I'm a holistic business coach,
Hmm.
because I can actually see to the depth. At one point in time, and it might even still be on my about page, that I dance with dragons, and that depth, the negative pieces, let's not have that control you. And the thing is with that, I know, because I haven't done relatively internship with therapy, I know the difference. I know the balance between dealing with the past and moving forward.
Hmm.
And it's really about rewriting those stories
Yeah. Yeah.
and reimagining those stories. It's not about why did this happen, which is where you go, what was going on, and diving in. That's more therapy. And this is like, okay, yes, this is what happened. How can we make it graceful? How can we be compassionate with ourselves? Because the most difficult critic we all have to engage in is uncertain.
Yeah, we say things to ourselves we would never say to anybody else,
Yeah,
even people we don't like.
exactly. Exactly. But you know what's funny is those things that we say to ourselves aren't us either.
No, it's not.
They're somebody else's voices.
It is, but we don't realize that because when we're saying those things to ourselves, we're not in our most, you know, we're not in our place of power.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's funny because I work a lot with story as well, and it took me a long time to realize that I was calling it a content audit, and it's not a content audit. It's a remembering of your stories and putting together the parts of what brought you to where you are, because we give it away. We forget about it or we think it's not relevant. And then we're out there marketing our businesses with these big gaps in our stories, and people don't believe us because we forgot these big chunks that kind of tie everything together.
Yeah, memory is selective.
Yeah.
It's really selective, and it's selective based on what we think is important, and what we think is important or not important. The not important stuff may be important to help somebody else.
Yeah, and it also changes,
Mhm.
because your priorities, what matters to you change. And I have found with working with women that are over 50 that they have the space and the time to kind of go back and put these pieces together in a different way than when they were coming at them. Because if these things were coming at you when you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, just like you can't you parent differently, you process your own experiences differently as well because you're being stretched in so many different directions.
Yeah, you really are. And what's really cool is I often work with women that are in their sometimes late 20s, early 30s, but often it's right in the mid 30 range. And to be able to work with them and move them forward so that
Mhm.
they're not in that stress place that we were in when we were those
Yes.
ages, it's
Yeah.
so beautiful to see. The end result is just
Mhm.
amazing. And I had one client who came to talk, well, before they became my client, said that the reason they came to talk to me was because of my age, because they knew I had the experience to
Mhm.
guide them without having my own agenda in the way. And I think
Yes.
that's a big thing once you're over
Mhm.
50, when you're working with clients, your own agenda is not in the way.
That's such a great insight. Um, I agree 100%. I work very differently now than I did before because you don't have to prove anything. You've done all that.
No,
You've
no,
done all that.
and it's really that landing in who you are, and I think it's more than just landing in who you are, it's opening to who you are
Yeah.
is really what it is. When you're in your 20s, especially up until age 25, 27, somewhere in there, your brain is not a full adult brain at all. And it's rewiring from a child's brain to an adult's brain. And you know the last thing that wires in is your risk.
Oh, wow. Say
That's
more
why
about
so
that.
many inventors are in their 20s when they come up with something new and creative
That's before they get afraid.
before they get afraid,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. And like you mentioned before that you like working with women that are in their 30s to help them kind of, not experience the same things we experienced. That's one of the things that I would really like to that I hope that this Real 50 over 50 series does for people that are younger, that we're sharing our stories and sharing our experiences. So in that light, like what would you what's the one thing that you want somebody who's, in their 30s to know, a woman in their 30s, so they don't have to experience something painful or hard?
Well, is one that they are more powerful than they realize. They
Mm,
have the power to choose, they have the power to be whoever they want to be, and that who they are is absolutely perfect. But how they show up isn't necessarily who they are. It's that who they are when they're in the quiet and they're connected and they're going, this is really cool, but I'm afraid to show this to anybody. Is it's
yeah.
that person that they're protecting from showing to anybody is really who they need to show up as.
Yeah, 100%. I wish I knew that when I was in my 30s.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is when you're in your 30s, right about 32, in my experience, right about 32 is when you really start opening up to that self-reflection that there's more to life than this crap. If you put, than this experience that I'm having, there's more to it. That's when you open to the exploration of the spiritual. Each decade, we have an opportunity. It's really interesting as being at this place, each decade that we hit, we have an opportunity. It's like something opens up
Mm,
that gives us an opportunity to say, I want to go forward. Oftentimes, right around the decades is when crises happen of some sort.
yeah.
Okay. When I was 32, I knew it was time to divorce my first husband.
Hmm.
And the way it happened was a whole other story. But but the biggest thing and that's when I seriously started my spiritual journey. My
Hmm.
spiritual journey actually started when I was 12, just before I turned 13. But every 10 years, there is that kind of happens, those decades. But what's really funny is those decades, are a little bit different, but everybody has an energetic year
Hmm.
within which they're in, from 1 to 9. And the cycles tend to follow that as well. So you have 10 years, you have the decades of your age, and then you have your energetic cycles that flow with that. And if you're not paying attention, and that's the other thing, what they need to know is to really be in tune to themselves and pay attention to what's going on, because life is just mirroring to you where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. And I was 32 when I started like radically cutting people out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even my own mother. Because it was
Yeah,
just, you're all gone.
yeah, and that's really important, because just because you have a family of origin or an adopted family of origin, and if it doesn't lift you up, then you have to either learn how to deal with it and not let it affect you, or you have to cut them loose. And because not all families are supportive.
No, no. And, it's not always, they're not always the people that are truly your family. I mean, I've built a family of people that are not my origin family, but you'd never know.
Exactly, exactly. And so some of that is our society, right? And how it's like, they're your family. Okay, well, here in the US, nuclear families are huge. So
Yeah,
if all your exposure is to sometimes the extended family, but if it's been a dysfunctional family down the road, down the road, down the road, it's like, yeah, somebody's got to break the cycle.
yeah, yeah. I fully believe I was sent here to break cycles, all kinds of cycles.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Just
You're a
plowing
cycle
through.
breaker. You're a cycle
But
breaker. You're a cycle breaker. I'm a change catalyst. And okay, yeah, it's
so
and that
let
happens, doesn't it? No
it,
matter
yeah,
where you're at, you don't even have to be conscious that you're doing it. It happens, right?
it just happens. Yeah. Like when I had my job, I worked in law firms for like 25 years before I started my business. And if their motto is if it worked in 1947, why change it now? And let's do this globally. And I was the one that just went around and I was just like, well, that's stupid. Let's change it. And I somehow positioned myself where they listened to me, and I was actually able to bring change. But
That's awesome.
like physically cannot do that work that worked in 1947.
No,
I
no, it's
just
a
can't do it.
whole different, it's
Yeah.
a
I'm
whole
like, why
different
are we not
ballgame.
fixing this? So let's talk a little bit about how this kind of plays out in your work. I'd really like to learn more about your RISE system, the methodology that you use, and how like all of these experiences that you've had created that. Because we talked a little bit before we went live about that was a hard thing for you to create, and I really believe when something is hard to build, it's built to last.
Yeah. Well, the biggest challenge with it was how it was bringing my intuition and my natural gifts forward. And
Hmm.
how do you tell people what you do? I had a client tell me several times, because we became friends after we were done working together. She goes, "You changed my life, but I have no idea how to tell people what you do." Because telling them you're a business coach, or telling them, you know, you're a holistic business coach, doesn't tell them what you do. And so that's part of where turn your mess into success came from, is that
Hmm.
part as the end result.
Hmm.
However, the way that I get there, I didn't have it named. And about 2014, 2014 or 2015, somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked me to come in and interview with them because they were, while I was at T-Mobile, they were doing major culture change. And with my company background plus my entrepreneur background, they asked me to come in. I was going through the interview, and just towards the end of the interview, which was fun, it was also a sign I wasn't to go back to corporate, but
funny how that happens, huh?
right? Right. But I had printed out all my coursework. I had printed out everything that I did with clients in groups and all of that. And I took it in, and they're going, "What methodology do you use?"
Mm-hmm.
And I could not answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
Other than I don't use a specific methodology, which wasn't true. I had my own. I came home and I told my husband about that question. And I knew I didn't get the job after that question. And I told my husband, I go, "They wanted to know what methodology I use." And he goes, "Your intuition?"
They don't want to hear that.
No, they didn't want to hear that. So from about that time, I started paying attention to the way I worked. What was it that I actually did so that I could explain it to people? Because in going through my work, we take care of the low-hanging fruit first, which tends to be the chaos, drama, and overwhelm in personal life as well as in business life, which is really what the first part of my methodology is ours, because the R.I.S.E method stands for reimagine. Okay. And in the reimagining is you're rewriting your story, you're acknowledging, where am I? And looking at your beliefs, habits, and behaviors that need to change. But when we rewrite our story, it's really about rewriting what it means to us. It doesn't make it go away. It just rewrites the meaning and helps us move forward. And so that's a huge piece. Sometimes that takes longer than some of the other pieces. And the thing to keep in mind is the R.I.S.E methodology is not linear.
No.
I'm going through it linear, but we work on all the different pieces of the R.I.S.E methodology at the same time. The second one is I, and that's illuminate your authentic you. And that is, we are more than we think they are. That's one of my quotes that I use. You are more than you think you are. And I think that's really important for people to know, because personality tests don't tell you who they are. They tell you how you've been programmed. There might be a little tiny bit of you in there, but even the best of them, the Enneagram, which is one of the best, still is who you, it's a marker of who you've become based on your experiences and your early programming in life.
They're tactical.
So my focus with my clients is to really step into the truth of who they are and trust that. And I do that with my friends too. I do that with my friends
because you can't stop, right?
I can't stop. I meet everywhere. And one of my friends posted on LinkedIn about their experience that they'd been having in a marketing and with a coach and stuff like that. And I heard about it all the time. And my focus with my friend was just to help her, guide her as her friend to trust herself and to stay in the truth of who she was. Well, and she shared that on LinkedIn because it was that piece that helped her navigate through the mess that she was in. So even my friends, I help them turn their mess into success, but it's really not me doing, it's me helping them to navigate it. Yeah. Right. And then the S is about structure and strategy. Because when you're really creative, putting structure and strategy in place is really hard. And it's hard because our creativity and lack of structure, our creativity was born out of the lack of structure that we often had as children, whether in our family, it's often born out of dysfunction, which is really kind of funny when you think about it. However, a certain amount of structure is necessary,
Well,
right?
you learn to function in the mess.
You learn to function in the mess and normalize it, not realizing it doesn't have to be that way,
Yeah.
because there are different types of messes. I just completed a workshop yesterday on how to turn your mess into success, to take people through how to do this. Well, those structures, the strategy is to move you forward. Obviously, you have to have
Mhm.
reimagine to go to strategy. But the structures, the most important structures that people need to put in place is understanding their expectations on their structures. Expectation, setting your expectations so that they serve you rather than opposite is important. Boundaries. And these apply. And the thing is if you don't have these, your business isn't going to grow anywhere. And time, wisdom, mastery is one of the courses that I do. And being able to master your time, but having time work for you. Yes, there's so many things out there about time blocking, time management. Well, especially for women and creative people, being able to have your time flow so it's with your natural rhythms works really well, is really important. And then the E is evolve and elevate. And it's important to understand that you're continuously, constantly evolving and elevating and being conscious about it. Because if you don't evolve and elevate and say, okay, I'm done, and that's
Yeah,
what.
it's never done.
And I think that's one of the lessons learned as as age, because it's always like, when am I at the end of this? What do I want? I'm over this. I want this to be done. I want to get to a point and be able to stop. Well, that's not life,
No,
but
it's
it's
not.
natural.
And it's so interesting through all of these conversations that I've had. Um, and it kind of like there's lots of differences and there's lots of common threads. And one of the common threads is you learn how to evolve without burning down all the ships.
Don't have to burn them all. You can let the ships go on their own way, and you don't have to burn them. That's good.
No, but you might need a few of those.
Right? They might come in handy again at some point in time.
You don't have to start over, you know? I mean, I beat myself up terribly thinking like, "Oh my god, I'm doing this again. Nothing I ever do works. When am I ever gonna stop?" You know, like, does it ever end? And no, and that's the best part. It doesn't ever end. And you don't have to start all over because all of these things that you've done brought you to where you are. And
Exactly.
that's the part that they don't tell you.
No, it listen, it's kind of like human beings are like, in the class I taught yesterday, is like artichokes, right? Because
Yes.
artichokes are pretty versus onions,
Yeah.
and we're layers. We're
Yeah.
layers. And growing is like going through a spiral, because you will readdress something at a new level when you are in doing your growth. Eventually, things will disappear, they're not on your spiral or your staircase anymore. But when you're coming back across something that is coming up again, you want to say, okay, what's in it for me to learn here? What's the
Mhm.
lesson?
Yeah.
Because until you learn the lesson, it will keep showing up.
It's such a different perspective because when you start to see it coming as opposed to being blindsided,
Hmm.
and then you know how to work through it
Oh, yeah.
or where
There's
to get the help.
exactly. There's a philosophy, well, there's a tool that I came across when I first started in business, and that I was actually trained in, is it's called the learning steps. And the first level of the learning step is unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. And then the next level is conscious competence. And conscious competence is when we can see it coming, but we don't change the behaviors. And usually it's at the first stage of conscious incompetence, we catch ourselves at the end and we go, oh, I did it again, right? You see that you actually did it again. And then you start moving through it and you see yourself doing it while you're in the middle of it, but you still do it. Okay. And then which brings you to the next level of conscious competence. Okay. And conscious competence is about you see it coming, it's coming, and you change it. As soon as you recognize it, you change it and you interact in a situation differently.
Mm.
And in your personal growth, that is the most difficult step because that's where people give up, because that's a lot of work, because life isn't hard. It's only hard to change the inside of us, right? And then if you do that enough, then you move into unconscious incompetence. And once you've moved all the way into unconscious competence, then you've got it. That's when it stops showing up for you, is when you get to that point. But we spend a lot of time circling, and sometimes we can pop into unconscious competence and pop out. It's like, it's life.
Oh, never boring, right?
No, never boring.
Well, we are actually at 30 minutes, and I cannot believe it. I could sit and talk to you all day, Victoria.
It has been so much fun, Donna.
Yeah, this has been great. And I just want to pop your website up here, and everybody please connect with Victoria at heartandsoulceo.com. And she's also on the Real 50 Over 50 webpage. And I always like to wrap up these interviews with leaving everyone with a wisdom bomb, something that you just always want people to know, something actionable and quick.
Okay, so something I want them to do that's actionable is one is, as I talked before, you are more than you think you are. And the most important thing you can do right now is write down in a journal is those gifts that you have, those things that you bring to the table that nobody else does. And they're the things that come easy to you and that you think everybody else should just know. They don't.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It took me a long time to learn that one.
It's you've got to stay in your genius,
Yeah.
right? Stay in your genius. And it's okay if you're not working there right now, just because you change, just because you shift where you're at in your life doesn't mean you're flaky. Okay.
No,
Our
no.
society, that word has been there for me over the last 24 hours. And it's so easy because you're not satisfied where you are. You want to go to something else. Okay. Is it pulling you forward? That's great. But it's okay to peel the layers and show up as you now,
Mm.
not yesterday.
What a great place to end. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. If you're listening on the replay, please tag us, put in comments, questions, and we'll come back and we'll answer and we'll keep the conversation going. And come back next week on Wednesday at noon Eastern time and we'll have another interview. We also have a wisdom panel next week at Thursday, the 25th at noon Eastern time as well. And we're just going to keep the wisdom coming. Thank you, Victoria, and have a lovely Wednesday, everybody.
Thank you, Donna. It's been a pleasure. It's been so much fun.